Hola amigos y bienvenidos. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre la letra G, and specifically the sounds that it makes on its own and in conjunction with other letters. So there are two sounds that we're going to be talking about today. You either have the soft G, which is what we're working on first, or the hard G, which we will come to next. All right, so what exactly do I mean by the soft G sound? I think you can hear it best if you think about the word go, G. You hear that soft G kind of sound with it, and this is the sound that we're going to be making within the following combinations. All right, so anytime you see la letra G beside of A, O, or U, you're going to hear that soft G sound before it. So here are a few examples here. The first one we'll look at is llegada. Llegada, right? You hear that G there. And also important to remember that those two L's do make that Y sound, right? Okay, our next example, we could see that in the word amigo, amigo. And finally, in our last example, think of agua, agua, or water, right? Okay, pretty simple enough so far. The next two that I want to look at are pretty important. It is G-U-E and G-U-I. Okay, so within this letter combination, if you ever see these three together, then that tells us that these middle U sounds are going to be silent. Okay, so we skip over them, meaning that we're only going to pronounce that first G sound and then the following vowel. Okay, so that first one, the G-U-E, keeping in mind that U being silent, it's actually going to sound like G, E, right? Ge. For me, I can kind of represent that with these three letters here, ge. And for this one here, G-U-I, I hear that G, E-E-E sound. So maybe something like this for me, gi, there. Couple of examples here. This one's a long one, but if you take your time with it, I know you can get it. It's a very common word nonetheless. Okay. We have the remembering that H is silent. So we have bur, and then right here we see that letter combo. We skip over that U, giving us that ge sound. So we have hamburguesa. Hamburguesa, hamburger, right? And another one, just like so. This is G-I, guitarra, or guitar. All right, not bad. So let's look at another small variation of that. In contrast to G-U-E, we actually might see this or this. Now you'll notice the difference. They have two little dots above the U. This is called a diéresis. And if without them we skip over that U sound, some of you might imagine that the diéresis tells us to pronounce it. So we pronounce the U sound when we see these combinations. So instead of ge, this now sounds like G-U-E or gue. And this should sound like G-We. Gui. Kind of fun to say too. So we can see a couple of these examples. Let's look at our first one here. Something that we're all aspiring to be es bilingüe. Bilingüe. Gue, just there, bilingual. Or we could look at this word here. Lingüística. Lingüística. Right. So you won't see these letter combinations as often as you'll see the ones above, but they're really important because you do hear a clear distinction within that sound. Okay, so the last rule, the last example that you are going to pronounce that soft g sound is if it is coming before any consonant. So before any consonant. Okay, so a few examples. Let's see. Let me make sure this is pretty defined here. Like within the word grande. Grande, you hear that g sound in the beginning, or like in front of the word grupo. You hear that g in front of it as well. All right, so that about covers it for our soft G. In just a moment, we're going to take a look at our hard G instead. All right, so the hard G in comparison to the soft G is pretty simple when it comes to rolls. The important thing about it is the sound difference. So rather than having that g sound for la letra G, instead you're going to hear that H sound, like in the word hotel. You hear that h, hotel, right in the beginning. I will say though, depending on dialect, that H sound can be more pronounced with some accents than others. For me, where I had done most of my studying in Spain and from Spanish teachers, they emphasize a more guttural h sound than maybe you would hear from somebody within Latin America. So do keep that in mind. So the H, like in hotel, I would just make a little note. It's a little bit harder than that, a little more guttural. Okay, so when do we see that? We see this sound if we have the combinations G-E and G-I. So this tells me this sound will sound like G, right? And this will kind of sound like he. Okay, so a few examples here. The first one, we see agencia, agencia, a similar word, agente, agente, and one for the G-I, we would see fingir, fingir. Hear how it has a little bit of a kind of a push to it, right? So agencia, agente, y fingir. Good job. All right, so technically that takes care of all of our pronunciations of G. But I do want to go back really quickly to the letter combinations we learned for our soft G. We saw G-U-E and G-U-I. We said this one sounded like ge, and this one sounded like gi, right? Okay, so the reason that I bring this up is there is technically one more letter that follows this same pattern of pronunciation, and we're just going to be replacing that letter G with the letter Q. So we should see Q-U-E and Q-U-I, or Q-U-E y Q-U-I. Okay, so just like the combinations above us, when you see these three together, that tells us that la U is silent as well. You skip over that U sound. So that only leaves you with the beginning sound, like the K for the Q, and then the remaining vowel sound. So if we put those two sounds together, we have K, A, K, kind of like that. And if we were to take the second pairing here, we would get K, E, or Ki, kind of like that, right? All right, so you may have actually heard this word before, que. It literally means what? So if you're speaking with somebody or to me and I don't understand your question, or maybe I didn't hear you, you might hear me say, ¿qué? In other words, what? What did you just say? And then you also have the sound ki. So thinking for this second one here, you have the word, it's kind of a long word here, but that beginning sound here is going to be ki. So quinceañera, quinceañera. Or in other words, a 15th birthday party for a young girl in Mexico. Or you also have the word, this, quinto, quinto. This means fifth. All right. So that being that, my friends, I think we are pretty good as far as our letters and pronunciation goes. Remember, Spanish is phonetic. So the sooner that you master this, the sooner you'll be able to read Spanish without any problems or hesitations. All right, guys. If you have questions, let me know. And apart from that, espero que tengan un maravilloso día y nos hablamos pronto. Adiós, amigos.